Hi, this is Dr. Karen Wilson Starks, your host for the Voice of Leadership, the show for business executives and global corporations who appreciate a principled biblical lens on leadership, featuring the song Consuming Fire by gospel jazz saxophonist Ron McMillan. You are listening to our Resource Renewal Series featuring shows for times such as these. My guest today is Michael Williams, and Michael Williams is a Colorado native. He runs Williams and Associates, which helps families and businesses learn and implement strategies in investments, debt elimination, and insurance. Michael currently has a team of 25 teammates in Colorado, Kentucky, Alabama, and Georgia. He's been licensed in the financial services industry since 2009. He's the husband of Chantel Williams and the father of 3 girls, Nalani, Sanaya, and Aviana. So, Michael, welcome to the show, to the Voice of Leadership. I'm so delighted to have you as my guest today.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Karen. I'm extremely excited to be here as well.
Fantastic. Well, Michael, one of the reasons that I asked you to join me on the Voice of Leadership today is that you have had great success using our online course, Teams Empowered for Dynamic Organizational Results. So first, Michael, I want to ask you something. Tell me a little bit about your team and what your team was like prior to using the Teams course. What challenges did you have?
That's a great question. So we have a lot of people that are part-time, right? So there's a leadership team that's 4 or 5 people that are full-time, and we have another 20 or so that are part-time. So one of the challenges we had was kind of getting some of the people part-time to see the same vision as people that do this for a living full-time, and really just being organized with some of the norms we had and allowing people to take ownership. So we definitely struggled with some of those in the beginning because my thought was, hey, we're all grown adults and this is the goal. So we kind of know what we need to do, but people don't really work that way.
Yeah, it can really be challenging when people may not share the same vision for why you're doing what you're doing. Let me ask a little follow-up question there. What did you do to get that team, both part-time and full-time, on the same page?
One of the biggest things is we pulled aside a group of key leaders, some people that weren't necessarily on the normal leadership team, but definitely had potential to kind of move to the next level of leadership. Just identify like 3 to 4 people, and I pulled them aside and worked with them as a small group, which is something that we never did until we went through your program. Pulled them aside, and we kind of set some smaller goals that this team had a direct impact on. So they're goals that the larger team could not hit without the leadership of those 3 to 4 people. So we just kind of pulled aside, and we definitely watched the course as a full team via Zoom with everything going on. And that's kind of how we started off.
Okay, so you had your full team to actually watch the course and to work through it together, answering the questions and so on and so forth. And with the smaller group, what additional things did you do with them?
A few things with the smaller group was just kind of get some feedback, because initially, like, I've been doing the same thing for 11, almost 12 years. You just kind of get used to the way you've been doing things. And some of the explanations we were giving people for why certain systems were in place weren't completely clear. We just kind of trained them on the system. So getting feedback, because we should always be adapting, but just getting some feedback to see what was working for the teams individually, what was causing them to maybe not have the best results, just really getting some good feedback so we could implement better strategies and help people really help the community better.
One of the things I like about what you're saying now, Michael, is an important part about team dynamics, and that is really having clarity, and particularly clarity about the why of what you're doing, and then also clarity about expectations and what comes next so that people can really be successful and show up in an excellent way.
That's absolutely correct. And I think, again, it's a little bit with my personality, I just kind of do stuff and run with it. And I didn't really realize again until we started doing this course that there were some people that were a little bit left behind. They maybe didn't feel they were integrated properly with the teams because we didn't necessarily have a something in place to kind of formally walk people through. We kind of let them work with their leadership, but part of my job, again, we don't have like a large team with 24 people, but we're small enough that I can still be reached by everybody and can have a hand in some of this stuff. So I just took a little bit more active role in that throughout this course.
That's phenomenal. I love that. It allowed you to be thinking about what active role you could take and getting everybody on the same page. I remember, Michael, one time you were telling me about a young man who was on your team who was relatively new and who didn't have any preconceived notions about what to expect and how he walked through implementing the lessons in the team's course. Can you tell us a little bit about that young man and what was different about him and his experience versus some of the other team members who had been there before?
Absolutely. So it's kind of like if I'm going into a new industry, like I was a mechanic or something, I'm a blank slate at that point. I'm learning something completely different, have no expectations of what how things should be done, as opposed to if I was a mechanic at a different place, I go to a different place. Sometimes you have to untrain habits that are already there. So with this particular individual, he was completely coming from IT, has nothing to do with what we do as a company, but he came in with a blank slate. So he kind of came in right towards the beginning of the team's course. I was working with him individually on some of those things. And within his first 30 to 45 days, he was one of the top producers at his level in our state, which has about 3,000 people in the company. He was number one in his category. So, and he's been consistently top 3 to 5 since he's got started and licensed.
That's phenomenal. So here's someone who didn't have a reason not to accept the new perspectives, and he just implemented those, and he was highly successful, being number one, and you said consistently being in the top 3 to 5 in the organization. That's really pretty phenomenal in terms of results, Michael. So congratulations to you and being a great leader and bringing that out, in this particular person on your team. What other results did you have, Michael, from using our Teams Empowered for Dynamic Organizational Results course? What else happened?
So two examples is just the fact that the gentleman I was referencing had the success he had by being coachable really and just implementing the stuff we were teaching that we learned from the course. It made it a lot easier for people to not be so resistant. When you have someone that's brand new coming in and they're producing at a better rate than some people that have been there maybe for a year, a couple years longer, it made them more willing to accept the changes that we were making. So that was probably the biggest thing overall. And as a result of that, that led to this next story, which was last year in our business, we did about 1.2 million of investments with families and stuff. So I averaged about 100,000 business a month. But within the first quarter of this year, as a result of implementing some of this stuff, we did about $900,000 of investment. So we did what we did in 9 months last year and 3 months this year, just because we had a little bit more structure and really addressed the concerns that people had, which we didn't even know were concerns last year this time.
That's really phenomenal, Michael. Those are really stellar results. And it really kind of points to something that I often say is that teams are so important to the success of organizations because they do the bulk of the work. So if you can resource your teams, if you can get your teams pointed in the right direction and having the clarity that you talked about bringing, then you kind of like unfetter them and they're able to just rise into the stratosphere and produce stellar results. I think it's significant that in 3 months, you pretty much did what you did last year in the entirety. That's unbelievable. And that's really significant. And it also sounds like you were producing models in the company, people that others could look to see how do you successfully walk through and get results. So you were being a model, you were creating models, and resourcing your team so they could take off. That's what I'm hearing you say.
Yes, ma'am, absolutely. And that was something like just reading your previous book, like just like lead ourselves first. Like I had to kind of evaluate where I was again with this team's course and say like, hey, I'm not producing to the levels that I know I should be producing to. It was good enough to pay our bills and to be top 3 in our categories, but it still wasn't 100%. It was very difficult for me to coach people and help them get to 100% when even though I was getting great results, I know they weren't 100% of my effort. So me leading that and then having some people that followed that definitely set a culture now of people who are coachable and producing at a much higher rate.
Fantastic. I love that, setting a culture, because one of the things that it's kind of like the secret sauce in business success is as you're developing individuals, as you're developing teams, you're also creating a success culture. And that's what I hear you talking about. And it's all of those dialed in together that make a difference. Michael, you also said that as a leader yourself, there were some things that you had to look at in you. So I want you to talk to us a little bit here about that. What did you personally learn, and how did you personally make some shifts in yourself and in your own leadership?
One of the biggest things is just making sure I'm getting, listening, and processing the feedback from my team so we can make sure we're implementing the best strategies overall. So one of the things we did is I met with the crucial leadership, like the top two or three people that represent the leadership team. And that leadership team, we individually met with the entire team. So the other 20 people, we met with one-on-one and just kind of went through a few different things, and that they held us accountable. It was an open conversation, like, hey, I like this, hey, I don't like this, hey, I think that you guys could be doing more of this. So that was just eye opening, and we did that with humility. Obviously, that was something we had to be humble to do. But as a result of that, people felt like, hey, they actually understand my concerns. They're actually interested in getting these fixed, which made the morale, soar through the roof because again, we have a smaller team and it really is like a family, but sometimes certain things do get lost in the shuffle. So for me, doing that was phenomenal because it really showed me some areas that I could grow in as a leader in communication with people. The second thing was really just being a little bit more structured. Again, my personality is more of a technical action person, so I kind of break things down a little bit more than they might need to be in certain situations. But with that being said, just having things planned out a little bit more throughout my days, so it's more intentional, and then we were getting more intentional results as a result of that.
That's great, Michael. You're really talking about being focused in a sense. And I love the word intentional so that you get the results that you're focused on. And I think, too, a lot of leaders forget that they may not see everything that's going on in the business. And so it was very smart of you to listen, and not just listen, but to actively seek feedback, to ask the questions, and then to use the feedback that you received and allowing yourself to be accountable, even to your own organization. Those are all hallmarks of excellent leadership that you implemented yourself and personally.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. And then as a result of that, so it wasn't just taking feedback from people so we could make changes. Because I think sometimes people think, okay, they're getting this information, what are they going to do with it? What we end up doing from there is there were some areas that there's some strengths I have, there's some weaknesses I have, same with the rest of our leadership team. But the great thing is there's no weakness that's a weakness for everybody. So somebody has that strength. So what we started doing is breaking down those people into smaller groups, and they're getting coached in certain areas with the leader that has that strength as well. And again, just doing that the last 7 days, that's something we've implemented the last 7 to 10 days. And we haven't been back at the office yet. We've been working remotely pretty much through this. But people's production, again, like just that small change this month or beginning of this month, we've done more production total this month than we did last month. And it's the 14th already. So I just think these small changes that we've been making have helped us as an organization as a whole in a tremendous way.
Oh, that's phenomenal, because one of the things that we know about high performance teams is that you have people on the team who have complementary gifts, strengths, and talents. They don't all have the same gifts and talents. However, collectively, you can cover more bases because somebody on that team is going to be really good at something that maybe you're not as good at. And you can also teach each other as well. However, the main point, though, is to really have your people operating truly in their sweet spot, if you will.
Absolutely. And I think if we're not working in our strengths, that can be exhausting over time. So it makes it a little bit easier that if you know you like to do something, you're great in that area, or it's a strength for you. If you're focusing in those areas and kind of delegate or partner with somebody else to handle the other things. It allows it to be more precision training for the people. And again, I think individually for me, I've been a lot less fatigued because I'm not spending mental energy on things that I really don't like or want to do.
Amen to that. Exactly. I know I have team members in my business to cover the things that I'm not good at for sure. And it really does make a difference. So I'm really glad to hear you talk about that. Michael, a few minutes ago, you started talking a little bit about how your business has been doing in the last month. And I did want to get back to that and ask you, how has your business fared during the global crisis? What changes or shifts have you had to make in order to stay successful?
That's a great question. So one of the biggest things we've had to do is, just working more remotely using tools like Zoom, et cetera, to meet with clients because we definitely, one of the biggest things is customer service with us. So we want to make sure that people know we're still around, we're still working for them. It's just maybe not in the office. So doing a remote shift for training, we were already using some of that technology to do training because we have teams in different states, but really just implementing that more with clients has helped us a lot. Our business really hasn't taken too much of a step back. I don't think we've maybe grown at the same rate that we were growing in the first quarter just because we've had to make a few different changes. But our business year over year is still up, which is a huge thing. And we've been producing month over month last year at a higher rate because of those changes. And our team has been very flexible with using the technology, and our clients have been flexible as well. So we've just been trying to make sure that we're adapting to service our clients and our team. And again, holding people accountable, being intentional about what we're doing, really haven't had too much of a drop off at all.
That's phenomenal because a lot of businesses are shrinking or going away during the crisis. And because of the leadership that you are showing and the way that you're building your teams and your culture, you guys are actually growing and you're actually thriving. So that's really great. Michael, you sort of mentioned that you've been using virtual technology anyway with your teams, and now you've just cascaded that more with clients. Talk to me a little bit about how the Teams course worked for you in a virtual context. Because some people might be concerned about that. Will this work if my team members are geographically dispersed? And I know that your team members, some of them are geographically dispersed as well.
Right. So initially, we had some people in the office watching the team's course, and we shared the screen to Zoom so the team that wasn't here could watch it. So it was a pretty easy transition to just, hey guys, instead of us being together that are here in Colorado, we're just going to all move that to the Zoom course. And I think people have been pretty flexible with it. It's been very easy to use. The results have kind of spoken for themselves, but the team has been very flexible. And with the technology we currently have, it was pretty seamless to use still.
Touching on something I was going to ask you about as well, because I know many team leaders out there get concerned about using an online Teams course, fearing that maybe it might be complicated to use or somehow difficult. So, how simple was this program to implement in your business?
It was very simple, especially because you guys had an open line of communication. So if there was something maybe we didn't have clarity on, or maybe slight changes that we had questions about, you guys were very responsive and made those changes. So I think it was very easy to use because, again, just it was simple as logging in and then just hitting the arrow and watching the videos, answering questions, and getting the materials out to the team so they can kind of give us feedback as well. So it's very easy to use. I think just about any organization that has some kind of technology capability to do videos and stuff, it's going to be very seamless for them.
Fantastic. So, Michael, then what would you say to any leader out there who's considering using the online Teams course?
I would encourage them to do it because it's going to, in my opinion, it'll definitely strengthen or reinforce strengths that your organization already has. It'll help you identify weaknesses, and it gives you step by step strategies to really help fix those and improve those weaknesses. So, and then as a result of that, if you have strengths that are enhanced and weaknesses that are turning into strengths, the organization as a whole is going to grow. So I think it definitely would make sense to do it. I really think it's a bit silly to not do it. That might sound kind of cliche, but I'm big on growth. This is the first program we've even done like this with our team. And like I said, the results have really spoken for themselves.
Well, the bottom line, you certainly can't argue with results that are heading in the right direction, both in terms of morale, as you mentioned, the team dynamic, the culture, and also the financial results. So that's what you're really looking for in a business if you have all of those things dialed in at once. And I like the fact that you said that you could easily follow the step by step instructions. In other words, it doesn't leave you in the dark, it gives you the roadmap how to get to where you're going.
Absolutely.
So, Michael, tell us a little bit about the services of your company, what it is that you do to help people, what do you provide for people, and if someone out there who's listening wants to contact you to learn more about your business, let them know how they can get in touch with you.
Great question. So, really, what we do is we serve individual families and small businesses and help them get debt elimination, debt management together because that's an area that families are really struggling with in the country, helping them build assets so they can retire with dignity and not have to go back to work and income that can supplement whatever they're doing at their job, as well as different insurances so they can protect their income and the time they're still building their assets. We do a complimentary financial plan for everybody we sit down with, just because a big thing for us is service. And we feel that if people are educated on the steps they need to take, it's going to make it a lot easier to implement those steps. So that really is a big thing for us. The best way to get in contact with me is my email address or my cell phone number, one of the two. And I try to give, and again, it's a big thing for me to give all my clients my cell phone number so they know, hey, if I have a question, I don't have to go through a 1-800 number. I can call Mike directly. And if I don't answer right away, I tell them I'll get back to them within an hour or two. So my email address is Mike Williams with an S 0728 at gmail.com. And my phone number is 719-229-2553.
Fantastic. Michael, I'm really so delighted by the work that you're doing because in these uncertain economic times, I know that families are struggling, and especially the part about preparing for retirement when a lot of the benefits that people were expecting may not be there and may be going away. So the fact that you are providing that service to the community is certainly exemplary, and I certainly wish you and your business continued success as you serve the community.
Thank you very much. We're definitely looking forward to continually serve the community and helping families hit their goals long term.
So, Michael, as you know, my show is predominantly for executive business leaders. And so I want to ask you, what words of wisdom do you have for my audience of executive business leaders? What do you want to leave with them?
Really, a few things. My philosophy is continue to self improve. If we're continually self improving, it's going to be a lot easier for us to hold others around us accountable to improve, and they'll be way more willing to improve. Secondly, really just making sure we're leading through service. Whatever industry, whatever people are doing, there's going to be some interaction with people, and we cannot be successful for not serving people. I think those two are impossible with almost any industry. So just lead through service, serve people, and the results that you'll get in whatever business you're in will explode. That's really my philosophy with leadership.
Thank you so much, Michael. And I'll say to my audience out there, you've heard Michael's words of wisdom. Lead yourself first. And you guys know that I believe in that. And secondly, serve other people. And when you do both of those together, it's a quantum leap and impact. So, to my audience out there, to those of you who are interested in learning more about our online Teams course, Teams Empowered for Dynamic Organizational Results, go to our website, transleadership.com, go to the Resources tab. Thanks for being with me today, and I'll see you next time. Today, we are talking about loving your employees at work. And you might wonder how we could talk about a subject like that. Well, first of all, let me give a very basic definition of love, and that is doing what is best for yourself and others. And you might wonder, why do I put self in there, especially if we're often other focused? Well, here's the reason. If you don't love yourself, it's very difficult to love other people. In fact, there are so many in our society today who are willing to kill others because they don't value their own lives. You've got to start at home with you, and then love others as well. Now, in the initial dance between a prospective employee and a company where that employee might work, we could say there's a dating and courtship process that goes on. We understand the company's perspective. The company is looking at this prospective employee and they're trying to gauge, is this person going to be a good fit for our organization? They're looking at the person's personality, the person's temperament, and also the person's skills. Now, not only is the company looking at the prospect also has to evaluate the company. Is this a great place for me to be? Is this an environment where I want to lend my skills and my ability? I remember one client where that I had who was applying for an executive leadership position elsewhere from his current company. And in the process, he was thinking more about whether that organization wanted him. And as I heard more about the story, it was very clear to me that even if they did, maybe he didn't want to work in that environment. And so we had to talk about that part of it too. It's a two-way street. If you're going to get together and, in essence, be married, love together, you've got to both decide that it's a good idea. So let's say you do that. You decide it's a good idea. Here you are now in the organization. Today, I'm going to talk about the company's responsibility in loving the employees, of doing what's best for them. So, number one, as the employee organization, you want to have that compelling mission and purpose that we talked about many times. That compelling mission, purpose, and vision that your employees are proud to be a part of it. What is it that you're doing? Are you saving children's lives? Are you curing cancer? Are you building state of the art office and workspaces that facilitate joy and innovation? Are you bringing news and information to people in a very compelling way? Maybe you're using artificial intelligence to provide home health to seniors. It's very similar to when, let's say, you're dating someone for the possibility of getting married and you find out that this person you're dating also shares your passion for becoming a missionary, maybe over in a foreign field, in a foreign country, over in China, or perhaps in Africa or somewhere. Or maybe that person shares your passion for being an educator, maybe an educator in inner city schools. Or you both have a passion for being foster parents or adoptive parents to children. And so you open your home to many children. The point is, there is somehow that shared mission and purpose and vision that's greater than just yourself. Secondly, the organization is responsible for appreciating the employees. In other words, you're appreciating the person for who they are, their character. There are some people who are just those ones in the workplace who smile and make sure everyone is having a good day. There are those people who they lend their skills and their brains to think of new innovations and new ideas. They know how to build on the concepts of others to get to a different place. So you're celebrating and appreciating their character, their personality, and also the job skills and the value that they bring to creating the culture and also to achieving the vision and mission of the organization. That means that just like that husband who maybe told his wife 30 years ago that he loved her, in the workplace, you regularly have to demonstrate that appreciation by saying thank you, sharing a note of thanks, perhaps offering an award or a recognition, and that award or recognition in the love language of the person who's receiving it. It could include cash compensation or it could include some other opportunity. But the point is, you don't say you love them when they first come in and never speak to them again. So you want to be appreciating employees regularly and on a daily basis, saying thank you to many people in the workplace. Thirdly, the organization is responsible for providing necessary support. So, your employees need training in order to do their work effectively. They may need other staff members because perhaps they're overworked. Maybe they're doing the job of two or three people. There may be some staffing issues that need to be addressed. They might need direct instruction, maybe from a supervisor, a boss, or a peer mentor, a peer coach. They might need time spent with the leaders, time spent with key people in the organization, maybe mentors, increased visibility, new connections. Perhaps in terms of support, it's things that just make life easier, like a flexible work schedule, childcare on site, dry cleaning services, fitness centers, all of this to facilitate work life balance. So that's number 3, providing necessary support. Number 4, opportunities to learn, grow, and develop. Keeping the relationship interesting. Just imagine if you were in a boring marriage, it's very hard to stay motivated and to want to stay in that marriage. People want to have renewed relationships on a regular basis. That means the same relationship, but that's kept alive, that's kept growing with new challenges, new skills, and with some diversity thrown in. That means that even if you have someone who's not living up completely to their potential or they've fallen behind, that you care enough to give that person feedback to again challenge them to learn and to grow. And if I think about it, think about people being made in the image of God. God was endlessly and is endlessly creative, and so are his people. And number 5 is co create an exciting life together. Don't just dictate what's next or what you're going to do. Have mutual respect and envision the future. Have something to look forward to together, where there's a balance of direction, where you're following in the footsteps of others, and a balance of freedom, where you get to lead, you get to create. In other words, you want a partnership for success going forward. Number 6, have fun together. Doing work in a way that's fun. The fun doesn't have to be separate from the work, although it can be. You can have game rooms, picnics, pizza parties, bowling outings, ski trips. However, even in the office, there are small, mini ways to have fun, even in the workplace, and to have little games here and there for stress breaks as well. And then, number 7, I would say this: as in any human relationship, such as a marriage, things don't always go perfectly. We do sometimes make mistakes. We can step on our partner's toes, and we can say things that are hurtful. So learn to say, I'm sorry. Learn to ask for forgiveness and to move forward with some new insight and new information so that you are continuing to build that trust in the relationship rather than to erode it by causing harm and not acknowledging it and not apologizing. And then I would say your bonus tip is continuous improvement of both the relationships and the culture. You are, in essence, looking at those who you're in partnership with and saying, you know what, 20 years ago they liked chocolate chip cookies. Well, maybe today they're not so enthused about chocolate chip cookies. Maybe they have a new interest, a new passion in terms of favorite foods. Well, find out what that is, know what that is, and offer what is current. That's the continuous evolution of the relationship and the culture where you're keeping your finger on the pulse and you're paying attention. So if we think about the word love, in Greek, there are multiple words for love. You have that kind of like sexual love, that eros love. You have that agape God kind of love, which is always relevant no matter the situation. And a different love is the phileo love, which is the brotherly love. And that's what I'm talking about today. And if that word phileo sounds familiar, that's because Philadelphia means brotherly love. Think about all the ways that you can show brotherly love at work and towards your coworkers and how you can create that culture that loves your employees. When you are an executive business leader, you really are the architect of that business. You are putting together a master plan or blueprint for what's going to happen in the future and how your organization is going to go forward. So, I want to talk about a few stages of business and what's required in those stages, and also a few roles that are important along the way. So, in an early stage of a business, this is a time when you might be what I'm going to call the chief cook and bottle washer. You're very hands on, and I call this the hands on phase. During this time, you're really getting to know the ins and outs of your business, how it works, how to do different positions and different roles, and what's needed in different positions and roles and at different levels. You're also starting to craft the kind of culture that you want your business to reflect. How do you want things to be done in your organization? The way you want things done around here. How do you want to treat people? You're beginning to put all of those wheels in motion. Now, hopefully, when you're in this hands on chief cook and bottle washer phase, you're not there, hopefully, for too long. You want to be able to go into the next phase, which is an early growth phase, which I'll call a strategic phase. And in this strategic phase, you're looking out to see who are some ace players that you can recruit and bring to your company who will take over the major daily functions, the daily operations of the business. And so when you've got these other players in place and they're running all of the daily operations, you then can continue to rise up and have a strategic view of the overall enterprise and the whole operation. So for these ace players, not only do they need to be skilled and able to run these areas pretty much independently, obviously with your guidance and direction, but you want people who bring expertise because you're still at the stage where you don't have time to do a whole lot of coaching and developing of someone who's got a whole lot to learn. So you're bringing in people who already know what they're doing so that they can begin coaching and developing others, including some who may not know as much. And that's fine for them to be able to do at that point. So not only do they need to have the skills and the abilities, you want them to fit in with the culture that you are cultivating, and you want them to also help continue to grow the culture that you've started. So that's that next phase, which I'll call kind of the strategic phase. Then when we get to the third phase, I'll call that this is really the executive stage here. You've now got these great ace players in place. They're developing some high performance teams in the organization, and you're continuing to build and define and highlight more about the culture and who you are and who you're going to be in the marketplace. And you become an ambassador. You're out there talking about the story of your organization. Who are you here to serve? What makes you distinctive and what makes you new and different? You may be out there in such a way as an ambassador, it brings new opportunities into the business as well. What you're not doing when you're in the executive phase is you're not running the day to day operations, nor are you dipping way down into the weeds doing the jobs that you've hired, hopefully, good people to resource and to do. In the startup part of your business, that's when you're kind of like the visionary person. And that's one of the roles. And as an executive leader, you always want to carry that visionary piece forward, no matter what stage of the business you may be in. Companies sometimes are in a phase or a season in their development when they might require what we could call a turnaround artist or a turnaround specialist. This is somebody who comes in and says, here's where we need to do some surgical cuts. Here's where we need to cut some fat or things that aren't working. And here's how we may need to reorganize and get aligned for future success. And sometimes that can be a very painful process. Instead of being the surgeon and you're going through the surgery under anesthesia, sometimes it can feel like the hatchet man has actually arrived to do the turnaround because it's quick and sometimes it's deep and very involved. And here's the thing to keep in mind. Many people who are excellent turnaround managers, turnaround surgeons and leaders, they're not very good at the next phase, which I'll call the maintainer phase. In the maintainer phase, you now have the right people in the organization in the right positions, and you're wanting to grow and develop those people. You have to keep the beat. You're no longer at the startup phase where you're casting vision for the first time and you're building and growing from zero, and you're no longer having to turn around something that needs to be fixed, but you're maintaining something that's going in the right direction and you're steering the ship so that you keep going in the right direction. And even as you're in the maintainer phase, never lose sight of the necessity for the ongoing reinvention, innovation, and the creativity to keep the business relevant. That's always going to be important. So there are times when, let's say you are the entrepreneur who even started the company and started the business. You may not be the one who's going to be the best maintainer. Maybe that's boring to you. Maybe you don't like the maintaining role. And if you want to stay in your own company that you've created, sometimes what founders do is they'll hire someone else to come in those executive maintaining roles so they can work elsewhere in the business. And at other times, that's the time you might decide to sell the company and to cash out. Because if you're really a startup kind of person and that's what you love, you may go out and start something else. So you want to be conscious and aware of where your passion is, your energy is, and your skill set, whether in starting up, maintaining, or in coming in to fix or turn something around. In those early stages, when you are in the hands on business, one of the watch outs you want to keep in mind is not to just create for yourself a job. If you create for yourself a job, that means you're always going to remain hands on in the weeds of the business. You haven't really created a business where you can rise up to the strategic level and up to the executive level because you're still working too much in the business. So decide, am I wanting to just do a job or am I really creating a business? And when you stay in that hands on phase too long, too, you ensure that the business stays small and is not able to grow. There's only so many hours in a day, and you're just one person, and you can't do chief cook and bottle washer for every job for too long unless your organization remains very, very tiny. So just consider all of that when you think about your organization and assessing what does your organization need right now. Where do you fit in to what your organization needs right now? Are you in the right job? Are you in the right seat, so to speak, on the bus, even of your own organization? And even if you're the founder, even if you're the starter of the organization, is it time to move on? Is it time to create a new job? Is it time to bring somebody in who even will be the executive over you? So these are hard choices, hard decisions, but your business needs different things at different stages. So always be taking a look and making those kinds of determinations. So as we think about today's segment and think about the biblical word of wisdom that goes with this, I was reminded of the Queen of Sheba. The Queen of Sheba, when she went to visit King Solomon. King Solomon was known as the wisest man in the world at the time. He was also one of the most wealthy people who ever existed in addition, and she had heard so many things about his wealth, about his wisdom, and how great he was. And she wanted to find out and see for herself who is the Solomon and what he's about. And so I want to just read a little bit about that and pay attention to what she noticed about the organization that Solomon had built around him. So this is First Kings, the 10th chapter, verses 4 through 8. And when the queen of Sheba had seen all the wisdom of Solomon, the house that he had built, the food on his table, the seating of his servants, and the service of his waiters and their apparel, his cupbearers, and his entryway by which he went up to the house of the Lord, there was no more spirit in her. Then she said to the king, it was a true report which I heard in my own land about your words and your wisdom. However, I did not believe the words until I came and saw with my own eyes. And indeed, the half was not told me. Your wisdom and prosperity exceed the fame of which I heard. Happy are your men, and happy are these your servants who stand continually before you and hear your wisdom. Let that be true of your organization as well, that your people will be happy to be in your service and to hear your wisdom. In your business as an executive leader, you're always looking out for key talent, new people that you can bring into the organization. So, what I want to highlight today are 5 areas to take a look at when you are thinking about who else to bring on the team. So, for one thing, you want to look at interests. That's number one. Number two, you want to look at abilities. Number three, values. Number four, culture. And number five, personality. So let's say that you're hiring for the chief financial officer in your organization. You want someone who has the ability to think strategically about the financial situation of the organization. You want that person to have high level math ability and skills as well. And you want that person to also be interested in doing this type of work. Now, there are times when someone may have the ability, they can do the work of the chief financial officer. However, that's not really where their passion is. That's not really what floats their boat. They don't necessarily want to do that type of work. So if you hire someone who fits into the category of, I can do it, but it really doesn't excite me, you're probably only going to have that person engaged for a shorter period of time. Or if it's difficult to bring their whole heart to the job, they may not even be able to leverage all the skill and ability that they do have. So it's this mix of both the interest in what the job is, as well as the skill and ability to be able to do the job. Now, there's some people, they have an interest in the work and no ability to do the work. And that's a real recipe for disaster because the person's in the role, everyone's depending on them. And though they are passionate about it, they cannot perform at the level where you need them to perform. They don't know how to do that job. And maybe they're so far behind. It's not like you can really address an on the job training. Ideally, when a person is going into a new role, there will be new skills, abilities, perspectives that they will learn in the job. However, there is a foundation, a baseline they have to have before they even get there. And so you want to make sure that you are assessing for that even before you interview the person. Because in your initial assessment, if you determine they don't have sufficient skill and ability, don't even interview that person. Don't even go any farther because that's a non starter right there. So, that combination of skill, ability, and also interest. Thirdly, you want to think about what the values are that went into shaping your organization. As an executive leader, you have some values that are important to you in terms of how you built the business. And those values really relate to the culture that you have built. For example, let's say you had a value of excellence. Then you're going to want to find people who have some values that are at least in alignment with excellence or in alignment with other deeply held values, whether they be honesty, service, innovation, speed, whatever it is that's a value for you, you want to make sure that others also have that as well. Maybe a value is making a lot of money, being very profit driven, and you hire somebody who's more of an altruistic philanthropist type person, and they're more into giving money away than they are into earning money, that could be a values conflict. So you might have a person who has the skill, they may have the interest in the role, and in terms of your organization, there may not be a very strong or very good values fit or connection. Sometimes you may not always notice it at the values level. Where you might notice the challenge is at the culture level, because you're looking for a person to show up in a certain way. So when we think about culture, we're talking about how we do things around here, how we communicate with each other, how we make decisions, how we treat each other, how we work together. And there are different cultures. So, for example, you could have a culture that's more collaborative. Everybody knows that they can rely on the next person to help out in a pinch. And you can rely on each other to get information and mentorship, coaching, and so on. Other cultures are much more competitive in nature. It's not so much a collaborative culture, it's more of a sink or swim on your own. And so, if you were more the collaborative type, or one who was used to having more of a helping culture, but you're in the sink or swim on your own culture, and you come to someone asking for something, they may see you as weak, or they might see you as not knowing how to do the job. They may not understand it as a difference between being more collaborative versus maybe more competitive in mindset. You could also have a culture that's more of a developmental and learning culture. It's okay that everybody doesn't know everything. You're going to learn together, and you expect people to come on the job to learn. On the other hand, you might have a culture that says, you know what, we're going to use them up. And then when there's nothing left, we're going to lose them. So a use them and lose them kind of culture, or a replaceable cog in a wheel culture. You know, when that cog doesn't work anymore, we put that aside and we get a new cog, and we do a little bit of a surgical replacement there. And they're not worried about the fact that a person's gone. They served their time, they did what they were supposed to do, and now it's time for someone else to step in. Another culture might be much more of a family oriented culture where all members are valued, and you're thinking about a long term hire, a long term commitment to the organization. You want the person to be there for 20 years, maybe for 30 years, as opposed to thinking about a short term environment, or where it might be survival of the fittest or dog eat dog, and you can only stay in for 5 years, and then you've got to switch out of that for your own health and for your own sanity. Some cultures are also fast moving cultures, so it's fast and furious. And other cultures might be what you might call the steady Eddie type of culture. They don't necessarily move too fast. Their emphasis may be on quality, and speed is maybe not as important. So, as you think about the abilities, you think about the interests, the values, and the culture, the last part you also want to think about is personality. Some personalities will do better in one culture versus another. Where I've often seen a lot of misfits would be a case, I'm thinking of a case where there was a woman who was a CFO in an organization. She actually was very skilled. She knew how to do the job. She had great interest in it. And she liked the values of the company that she was coming into. They stood for quality, they stood for excellence, but there was still a cultural misfit. She was the type who wanted to move along at a more steady pace, and she was in a very fast paced startup entrepreneurial kind of culture. And she had come from more of a stable corporate sort of culture. And so that was very stressful for her. And ultimately, she made a decision to move to a different organization, because though she had the skills, the abilities, the interests, and she appreciated the work of that organization and the values of that organization, that work culture and pace was not really playing to her strengths in a sense. So you want to look at the personality piece as well. So as you're thinking about your organization, and as you're thinking about who needs to be there, and maybe who maybe doesn't need to be there in terms of hires that you're considering, we do have some tools that we use to help you take a look at all five of these dimensions. And so if you would like to have a conversation with me about the hire that you're looking to make in the near future, an executive hire, we can talk about the tools that we have that can help you make a great decision. You'll know upfront what the skills and abilities are of the person. You'll know upfront what their interests are, and the tools will help you to craft the best questions to ask in the interview to assess cultural fit and other pieces that might be important. So be sure to contact me if, in fact, you would like to look at ways to hire in a more productive manner. So before we end today, I want to take a look at a little bit from the story of David and Goliath in our biblical words of wisdom. This comes from 1 Samuel, the 17th chapter, and it starts in verse 31. And just to get the backdrop on the story, the Israelites were in a conflict with the Philistines, and the Philistines were a very powerful enemy nation. They had on the Philistine side this giant, Goliath. He was big, he was tall, he was strong, and he was intimidating to everyone. Nobody on the Israelite side wanted to fight him because here were the terms. Goliath was going to fight one man from the Israelite side. Whoever won that country would be in charge of the ones who lost. Those were very high stakes, and so not that many people were wanting to step up. David, who was a young shepherd boy at the time, barely a teenager, he goes to the front lines sent by his father to give food and provisions to his older brothers who are there. And he learns of this challenge from Goliath, and he asks people questions about it. Well, what reward is going to be given the person who kills this giant, and what's the situation? And he was kind of surprised that no one wanted to face Goliath. And so he was saying, I'd be willing to fight him. And of course, his brothers wanted him to shut up. They just thought, who are you, you young person coming here? And you've left those few little sheep back in the pasture. You don't even belong down here on the front lines. It's kind of like the mindset that they had about him. However, the King Saul, heard that David had said these things. And so this is where we pick up the story in 1 Samuel 17 and verse 31. So now when the words which David spoke were heard, they reported them to Saul, and he sent for him. Then David said to Saul, "Let no man's heart fail because of him," meaning Goliath. "Your servant will go and fight with this Philistine." And Saul said to David, "You're not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you are a youth, and he's a man of war from his youth." But David said to Saul, "Your servant used to keep his father's sheep, and when a lion or a bear came and took a lamb out of the flock, I went out after it and struck it and delivered the lamb from its mouth. And when it arose against me, I caught it by the beard and struck and killed it. Your servant has killed both lion and bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, seeing that he has defied the armies of the living God." Moreover, David said, "The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, he will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." And Saul said to David, "Go, and the Lord be with you." So just notice, David had already demonstrated skill and ability for the job. He was interested in the job. And if you don't know the rest of the story, he successfully completed the job, killed the giant Goliath, and Israel now had the Philistines as their servants. So much success on your journey in finding the right people for the job in your organization. Thank you for listening to The Voice of Leadership with me, Dr. Karen Wilson Starks. I am also your concierge executive leadership advisor for when you need to make tough business decisions, facilitate executive succession and transition, develop your executive team, lead change, create a positive and profitable culture, or leverage marketplace creative advantage. You can reach me at Dr. Karen, Karen, at transleadership.com. Also go to my website, transleadership.com, for more leadership resources and insights. I want to give special thanks to Ron McMillan, gospel jazz saxophonist and national Billboard recording artist, also known as Mr. Sirius XM Jazz Watercolors, for allowing us to use his gifted music on our show. Thank you for joining me today, and I'll see you next time.